world, Dave, tell me in what universe anybody who supports Hamas can be welcome in this country?
Well, look, Chris, we have a duty to every citizen in this country not to allow people to come to this country who might endanger them or endanger our own democracy. I'd make the point that no one has a right to move to Australia or migrate to Australia or be granted humanitarian refuge in Australia. It's a choice we make as a nation, and it's part of the exercise of our sovereignty. It's making sure that the people we bring here are not going to detract from social harmony, are not going to cause division, are not going to pursue or persecute one another, are not going to seek to undermine our values and our system of government.
Does the Coalition have faith in the Director General of ASIO, Mike Burgess?
Look, I'd say that Mike Burgess is offering his professional opinion. Ultimately, though, it's the government and ministers that set the policy about who can come to Australia. I mean, he might be correct in terms of a legalistic sense of what ASIO looks at and doesn't look at. But the government more broadly has to have questions of character, ability to integrate, adaptation to the Australian way of life and Australian values first and foremost, and of course, the security of Australians. Now, we've seen last week, for instance, Michelle Bullock, the Reserve Bank Governor of Australia, be prepared to talk truth to power, so to speak, and we should expect that of all of our senior civil servants in statutory protected positions like that of the Director of Security.
But in just the last week, we've seen Mike Burgess say that the threat of Islamophobia in this country is almost equal to the antisemitism that we've seen rife in this country since October the 7th. How can he make that equivalence, and shouldn't that be opposed publicly not only by the Coalition but by the government?
Well, I think empirically that is clearly not the case. I mean, clearly we've seen a huge outburst in anti-Semitism. It's incidents that are well documented, wide-scale protests, people being doxxed, and we frankly have not seen anything like that level of Islamophobia being expressed. If we had, I would be the first to condemn it. We should all be quick to condemn it, but it's simply not been the case. Now, look, Mike Burgess is a public servant. I think, as a politician, you should spend your time criticising and focusing on the government. But it's not an assessment I would make, and I don't think it's an assessment that is supported by the evidence. And I do worry a little that he's, saying what he thinks his political masters want him to say, and that is not a good position to be in.
Well, this is the problem. Of course, the Coalition doesn't want to undermine confidence in public officials, especially when they're in this intelligence area. But here in the last week, you've got Mike Burgess saying that equating the threat from Islamophobia and anti-Semitism in this country, which you say is empirically not the case, and then on the weekend suggesting that we would let people into this country who support Hamas if they don't support the ideology. I mean, both of these statements seem manifestly untrue, and they're conveying the wrong message to Australians about how we manage our own society and our own security threats.
Look, I think you make some good points there, Chris. I think I'd just say, look, the Director General of Security in Australia, it's a very important position. I think their public appearances should be pretty rare and sparing, and when they speak, it should be with authority and in a way that doesn't undermine the reputation of their office or the integrity of their office. Ultimately, I mean, the policies that we've seen in Australia, the outburst in anti-Semitism, concerns we've seen about the security and immigration checks that are being placed on arrivals from Gaza, those are ultimately responsibilities of the government of the day, the Albanese Labor government of the day, and they're the ones who ultimately should be held accountable for this.
Let me ask you one more question on this. Do you believe that Mike Burgess seems more intent on not offending pro-Palestinian Australians than he is about being frank about our security environment?
Well, I'm not going to answer you directly there, Chris, but I would say that, look, it's important at these sorts of times that people who hold public offices, level with the public, are honest and frank with the public. Politicians are allowed to portray a particular side of the argument, but statutory office holders need to, be frank and fearless in their advice, not only to their political masters, but to the public at large.
All right, Dave Sharma, thanks so much for joining us. I appreciate it. Dave Sharma there, Liberal Senator for New South Wales.